Measure for Pleasure is on one hand, it's a historically inclined show, harkening back to the Restoration plays of the late 17th and 18th century, but then it also is very much a contemporary modern farce with a whole lot of naughtiness and inappropriateness thrown in as an emulsifier.
Measure for Pleasure it's got that classic language and those rhyming couplets and those beautiful words that you just don't hear anymore. For example, Hermione, she says rantipole tatterdemalion. You don't hear that anymore. But it's accessible for modern audiences because it's not too terribly difficult. It's not so buried in old language that you're not going to be able to understand it. And the ideas are still fresh. I mean, we're still lusting and we still have feelings and sexual feelings and a sexual drive. And so while it's Restoration style and high language, it's still very accessible to its audience.
Interesting style because it's set in 1751, I think, but it feels very, very contemporary, and you'll see that with our costuming too. We have pieces from the Restoration period, but we're also going to be wearing contemporary stuff like mini skirts and fishnets. But it's very heightened language, and we're using fans and we're wearing corsets and we speak with proper British accents, but we make jokes that you would never ever think that people of that time period would make. Lowbrow humor that today's audiences would get versus the audiences back then. So it's a really interesting style, and it's been a blast to do.
Measure for Pleasure is very over-the-top comedy, very Restoration style, those old like School for Scandal style comedy of errors. I don't know if that's the correct way to describe it, but it's kind of comedy of errors meets modern day comedy. It definitely feels very modern.
It is a modern take on old Restoration. I love the fact that the play on words, the measure for pleasure from measure for measure, it's mistaken identity. It's really a sexy Restoration romp, is the way I see it.
Wildly physical. For a script that's been so much, for a script that is very verbose and very focused on language and making a lot of its comedy through paying homage to the period, not mocking the period, I will say, because it definitely has a reverence for this Restoration dialogue. But that aside, well, not on that aside, but on top of that, really, I think that we have added such a physical play, layered right on top of that. And sometimes I think it takes precedence in that I think when you leave the Victor Joy, you might not be going, man, that was a great dick joke. You might be going, man, that was an awesome pratfall. Man, that was a bad sound bite, but that's what I'm going to stick with.